Welcome to the Bible Words channel. Today I would like to look at Matthew chapter 4, verse 6. And the devil said unto him, If you are the Son of God, cast yourself down, for it is written, He shall give his angels charge concerning you. Jesus had just finished a 40-day fast at the beginning of his ministry. One of his temptations Jesus faced is this one: throw yourself down from the top of the temple. Surely the results will make you famous, as the angels prevent you from dying as you gracefully float down to the ground. However, Jesus would have had to cast himself down from the top of the temple. What does that mean? What would that involve? Was it just to jump off and let the angels do their thing, or was there more involved? The word used here for casting down is balló. The Strong's number is Greek number 906, and it appears 124 times in the New Testament. Let's have a look at some examples of how this word is used. When Jesus was gathering his disciples, he saw Simon and Peter fishing. Matthew 4 verse 18 says, And Jesus, walking by the Sea of Galilee, saw two brothers, Simon called Peter and Andrew his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishers. In this case, casting means that a net is thrown into the water. The net is no longer under the control of the people fishing. The amount of fish that end up in the net is not up to them. This lack of control can even mean that the net might be irretrievably lost. During the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says this in Matthew 5, verse 29. And if your right eye offends you, pluck it out and cast it from you. For it is profitable for you that one of your members should perish, and not that your whole body should be cast into hell. The Greek implies the following. If your right eye is a stumbling block for you and causes you to sin, lay hold of it and remove it. Even rescue it from yourself and cast it away from you. In other words, willfully choose to ignore what your eye is looking at. Given the amount of visual media that is now available, choosing not to watch certain things is no longer possible without serious prayer and the power of the Holy Spirit. Matthew chapter 7 verse 6 says this, Do not give that which is holy unto the dogs, and don't cast your pearls before swine. And the New American Standard Version continues, or they will trample them under their feet and tear you to pieces. Matthew chapter 8 verse 6 says this, There came unto Jesus a centurion beseeching him, and saying, Lord, my servant lies at home sick of the palsy, grievously tormented. The Greek says, Lord, my servant was cast into his home, paralyzed and fearfully tormented. Many English translations imply that the servant is laid up in his home because he is sick. The Greek, however, implies a past action. The servant was cast into his bed at some point in the past. Just like a net which is cast into the sea continues to gather fish until it is taken back, this servant continues in sickness and torment as a result of the original action. Matthew chapter 9 verse 17 says this, Neither do men put new wine into old bottles, else the bottles break, and the wine runs out, and the bottles die or perish. But they put new wine into new bottles, and both are preserved. Winemakers all over the world know that once the juice is in the cask, all human control of what happens inside it are lost. Yes, you can control the environment outside the cask, but not what happens inside it. In Matthew chapter 10, Jesus could have just as easily said this: "Don't think that I came to cast peace on the earth. Rather, I came to cast a sword onto the earth." In Matthew chapter 18, Jesus tells the story of a servant who was forgiven a massive debt. After that, the forgiven servant demands payment of a debt from a fellow servant. Verse 29 and 30 says this: "And his fellow servant fell down at his feet and besought him, saying, 'Have patience with me, and I will pay you all.' And he would not, but went and cast him into prison till he should pay the debt." When the master heard about this, he did not just cast the servant into prison. The Greek word used means that the master personally hand-delivered him to the jailers. He handed him over. The same word is used when Judas betrayed Jesus, when he pointed him out and they took him away. This is a very different situation than casting someone away. If you hand-deliver someone or something, you can ensure a result or outcome. Mail and courier delivery services rely on this concept: addresses and signatures required. In the parable of the talents, Jesus says this to one of the servants in Matthew 25, beginning at verse 26. "His Lord answered and said to him, 'You wicked and slothful servant, you knew that I reap where I did not sow, and gather where I have not scattered. You should have therefore cast my money to the exchangers, and then at my return I would have received what was mine with interest.'" Notice that all the servant needed to do was to hand over the money to the bankers and walk away. Responsibility for what happened to the money afterwards would have transferred to the bank. These verses show two other concepts. The master can sow and winnow. Sowing involves casting seed into the ground. This is different from casting meant by the word balló. Sowing is the act of scattering seed into the ground that you either own or control in some way. Ownership and especially control over the result does not leave the sower. When balló is used, the caster transfers ownership to some other person, place, or thing. Winnowing involves throwing something into the air to separate the good seed from the unwanted chaff, straw, and debris that blows away in the wind. Even here, the winnower controls the situation. He is separating the things he wants to continue to own from that which he no longer wants. Matthew 27 verse 35 describes the crucifixion of Jesus. "And they crucified him and parted his garments, casting lots, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophet. They parted my garments among them, and upon my vesture did they cast lots." This is a reference to Psalm 22 verse 18. The Hebrew word used in that verse for casting of lots is naphal, Strong's 5307, which means to fall down. In Matthew 12, beginning at verse 41, balló is used 7 times in 4 verses to describe what Jesus was watching at the temple in Jerusalem. And Jesus sat over against the treasury, and beheld how the people cast money into the treasury, and many that were rich cast in much. And there came a certain poor widow, and she threw in 2 mites, which made a farthing. And he called unto him his disciples, and said unto them, Verily I say unto you, that this poor widow has cast more in than all they which have cast into the treasury. For all of them cast in of their abundance, but she of her want cast in all that she had, even all her living. Luke 16, verse 19 describes some friends who had cast their friends onto the gate of a rich man. They probably hoped that he would be noticed by someone whose wealth would benefit him in some way. There was a certain rich man who was clothed in purple and fine linen, and fared sumptuously every day. And there was a certain beggar named Lazarus, who was laid at his gate, full of sores. Notice that the friends of Lazarus had left him at the gate at some point in the past. They had transferred responsibility for his care to the people who passed by, including the rich man. Recognizing that they could no longer care for their friend, they placed Lazarus in a location they hoped would give him the best chance of survival. Notice that Jesus did not condemn his friends. However, when the rich man died, he recognized Lazarus in Abraham's bosom. Day after day, the rich man passed him by, to the point that he even knew his name. John 13, verse 2 says this about the Last Supper. And when supper ended, the devil having now put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him. Notice the use of the 2 words, casting and betraying, or handing over. At some point in the past, the devil cast an idea into the heart of Judas. Over time, that concept festered. The result was the betrayal, the handing over of Jesus to the soldiers. In John 18, Jesus tells John to cast his sword into his sheath. In a fight or a war, a soldier may holster a weapon, but will have a hand on it, ready to use it. Yet Jesus told Peter to cast his sword into his sheath. The weapon is now put away. Because the hand is not on the holster, control is removed from the soldier. Have you ever watched a police procedural where the suspect is surrounded by officers who are ordered, "Don't shoot"? Even when they lower their weapons, the suspect is in danger. It is only when they holster their weapons that the danger to the suspect is past. In this verse, Peter is ordered, cast your sword into its sheath. Relinquish ownership over your sword. In Acts, Paul was on a ship whose captain wanted to travel to another port in Crete. The supply lines there were better than where they were, and it would therefore be a lot more comfortable to spend the winter in that new location. As they sailed west along the coast of Crete, however, a hurricane-strength wind was cast down from Crete, called Euroclydon. Notice that the wind was cast down from Crete, which was a one-time event. Paul and his shipmates were caught in the consequences of this event. They were driven 1,000 kilometers west to the island of Malta 14 days later. In the book of Revelation, balló is used 28 times. Balló is used 4 times in Revelation chapter 2 in the letters to the first 3 churches. In Revelation chapter 9, Balló is used 4 times to describe when Lucifer is cast down to earth. In the last chapter of Revelation, all the angels and people cast into the lake of fire are listed 4 times. Balló is also the 16th final word in the Greek New Testament. Here are some observations regarding the concept of throwing or casting things. People can throw things with a deliberately controlled purpose, such as sowing, winnowing, handing over, or betraying. People can also throw things away, like garbage. I have not mentioned this concept before because this word did not appear near verses containing the word balló. In Matthew 27, verse 5, Judas threw away his blood money. 1 Peter 5, verse 7 tells us to throw away our cares onto Jesus. In this case, whatever is thrown no longer exists in the mind of the thrower. That is why the priests could not give Judas's money to the treasury. They could not accept ownership over the money. And what happens to your cares? In Jesus, they disappear. Unlike the priests, they will not be repurposed. They truly do disappear. On the other hand, casting involves a transfer of control and ownership by the thrower. There is one possible exception, and that is when money was cast into the treasury in the temple. Just like present-day gizmos where you can watch donated money go through several coin drops or spirals, in the temple, the place where you gave money for all the world to see and hear was fitted with a trumpet mechanism. That particular device made a lot of noise as money was cast into it. But even then, it was the coins that made the noise, not the person putting it in, even though the person might draw attention to himself while doing so. And bear in mind, once that money was cast into the mouth of the trumpet, control of that money changed hands, no matter how much noise those coins made on the way into the treasury. Finally, let's have another look at Matthew chapter 4, verse 6. What was Jesus tempted with at the beginning of his ministry? Casting down involves the transfer of control over your life, over your mission, over your purpose. As a Christian, this may be a worthy goal as you seek guidance from the Holy Spirit, walking in His power, guided by the words of Jesus and by the love of the Father. Jesus too was on this earth for a particular purpose. He needed to be in control and ownership of that calling. The devil was offering him a way out. Transfer over that control to others. Let others take care of his purpose. There were 3 problems with this temptation. The first one is found in the actual meaning of the word balló. Control of Jesus' body would have been transferred to the forces of gravity. The second is found in Jesus' reply. Don't put God to the test. The third is a supposition. What if it wasn't God's angels that came to take charge, but someone else's? Thank you for watching this presentation. If you enjoyed it, please click on the like button. Please subscribe to the channel to receive new content as it is posted.